Hello and welcome to another episode of Interview with a Schizophrenic. I'm your host, Duncan Samra Singer, and today I have the great pleasure of having Sable with me. Sable is 24 from Florida and she has a schizophrenia diagnosis. So welcome to the show, Sable. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good as well. Um, I recently moved to Scotland and I'm just loving it here. Yeah, it's just really nice. So I'm, I'm doing well.
I
Um,
recently moved to Florida, so also very nice.
Yeah, I've never been to Florida. Is that on the West Coast, is it? No,
Uh,
the East Coast,
so,
isn't it?
yeah,
East Coast.
hmm
It's yeah. Because it's west to me, but east in America.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it would be considered East in America. Yeah.
East Coast. Okay, Sable, let's start. So the first question is I want you to give me a summary of your mental health journey because, before we get diagnosed, obviously the symptoms start before then. Um, there might be events which you want to talk about. It's just to give, the listeners an idea of how these conditions start, how the diagnosis happens,
hmm
and what it's like to go through. So if you'd like to talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, my schizophrenia symptoms started when I was about 12. I'm not sure about specific triggers that could have been involved there. I know I was not in a great home
What
environment.
what sort of symptoms were you having at 12?
I at first I would just have like at first I just had one voice that would just narrate what I was doing, which was annoying and kind of creepy, but I just got used to it and ignored it. But then it ended up being I guess around that age it was three or four voices just chattering all the time and yelling at me and screaming and insulting me just
Because
constantly.
because I'm when I think back at my childhood, around that age, my head was a real mess. It was full of chatter, but it wasn't voices. It was just full of, I don't know how to describe it, but I think voices were happening, but I didn't go through that breakdown where, like, break down a barrier.
hmm
I don't know if you understand what I mean. So, but my head was a mess, from in my adolescence. Um,
Like a soundtrack of indiscernible voices, sort of thing.
yeah, no, I think looking back, I think I don't know. My theory is that there is some sort of psychic aspect to schizophrenia, um, and I think that's what was happening to my head.
hmm
Um, but I just didn't realize it at the time. It's just looking back, and I think I had certain thoughts, and I wonder, yeah, that sort of sounds like somebody else would have said that. Um,
Yeah.
so is that thing going on? Yeah. So please carry on. Tell me more of what
Sure.
happened.
Yeah, I had that. Um, I also had visual hallucinations, which could vary from basically anything. Just seeing a cat that's not there, a person that's not there that disappears after a while. Sometimes it was worse, like just corpses being everywhere, which was distracting. um, I realized very quickly that something was very, very wrong, but I did not I didn't know what to do about it. I was afraid to talk to my parents about it. I tried to suggest that something was going on to see how they'd react, but they reacted really badly every time I even mentioned something like that. So eventually I was like, okay, I'm just gonna hide this completely. I had the voices, I had the visual hallucinations, I had other auditory hallucinations, so it would be just things crashing, explosions. Um, I also had. I know this is actually not. a normal schizophrenia thing, but I also had some. It was almost like a fantasy world sort of thing that I would get pulled into almost another world and it feel like I was somewhere else, like
Hmm.
with all the senses and stuff. That was also an issue. But I had all these things. But I just got really, really, really good at what a lot of people with mental illness and neurodivergence call like masking. I just got really good at hiding it. I was able to figure out which ones were hallucinations sometimes because I would look at what other people were doing. So if someone ran into the area with a gun and nobody else was reacting, I would look at them and be like, all right, okay, that one's 90% sure that's a hallucination. We're not going to worry about that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I was going to worry about that, but I knew I had to pretend not to be worried and not to react and not do anything that could give it away. And that was,
That's kind of like a, as a child, that's our response, isn't it? To Because we're not adults at that age,
mhm.
um, so there is an element of trying to be a good child, to
I think I
not
overdid
disrupt
that.
anything.
Yeah,
Um,
I
I'm just like, have you seen that film Sucker Punch?
I haven't.
So, have you heard about it?
Not, no, I don't think so.
So, it's a film. I think probably it's must maybe about 10 years, maybe longer that it came out, and it portrays mental illness of a young girl, but it does it in a way where she is fighting in a fantasy world,
Hmm.
where but it's actually a fantasy world that she created to deal with what is going on in the real world. Um, I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know if it has any resonance to you, but yeah, it's kind of interesting.
interesting.
It's
Yeah,
not. It's done in a kind of a fun, exciting way rather than any other kind of interpretation. Um,
yeah. I think my dad might have watched that because your summary of it sounds familiar, but no, I haven't watched that yet. Yeah, my sister suggested that the fantasy world. I just, for simplicity's sake, I ended up making my own vocabulary for a lot of the things I was dealing with. So I started calling the fantasy world the other world, and I started calling just normal everybody reality the primary world. Just differentiate in my own mind and make it easier for myself. But if it's a coping mechanism, it's not a good coping.
yeah,
It's yeah. I did not choose to go into it. It would just pull me randomly, and I would have to try to act as normal as possible. Like when I was doing college classes, I'd get pulled into a random battle and have to be as normal and try to make sure my expressions were right for what was going
yeah,
on in the class, and while not being able to see the class. Ugh. If it was a coping mechanism, it was an extremely dark, dangerous coping mechanism that I did not choose to use, which doesn't seem like a coping mechanism. But I don't know. I know that's not normal. I've looked at a lot of the stories of other schizophrenic people, and most of them don't talk about that specific thing. That's more like voices and other auditory hallucinations and visual hallucinations and
yeah.
paranoia sometimes. And
You know,
whatever's going
um,
on with me is a little bit different than most people's experience.
Sable. So I've done about 40 interviews, and they're all different. And there's nobody who's had an experience which is really just like mine. There's little bits that are similar, but we do go through something quite individual. That's what I've learned. Um, for example, Jasper, I could, I could. Jasper was a few. I think it was last year. I did Jasper,
Hmm.
and 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 he had a breakdown, and it was similar. I could relate to parts of it, but then other parts of the story were completely different. Um,
Yeah,
so I think it is an individual experience. Um,
yeah.
but
I think that a lot of doctors seem to slap a schizophrenia label on symptoms that like people have enough symptoms so they're connected, but I feel like there probably should be a more subcategories. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's overdiagnosed. I think it's just not specific enough of a term to
But
really.
you know what I think is that as schizophrenics, we need to talk about it in a comfortable manner, in a in a safe environment, because rather than being pigeonholed, I just think we just need that safe environment where we can talk about it,
Mhm.
and then it's not about it's just about expressing it and getting it out of our heads, you know,
Yeah,
without. I think that's the important thing, and I know that we don't get that chance often. Um,
I don't know. I have actually. I have a website where I have started to basically do my own biography in small snippets of about schizophrenia and just my life in general.
yeah.
Schizophrenia is so intertwined with every part of my life that
Mm.
the whole thing is basically a schizophrenia journey with 70 entries at this point. But yeah,
So, I can share that link on the description. It's up to you. If you want to, if you want me to share it, I can do that.
that'd be great.
Okay.
It's basically thequeerschizophrenic.com, but I can send you the exact link to make it
Yeah, yeah. Send me the link afterwards. So tell me more about how you got diagnosed. What happened there?
yeah. I actually managed to hide my schizophrenia somehow for a very long time.
Hmm.
I, as a kid, I looked at what was going on with me, and I was like thinking, all right, the only people that I have ever seen who have problems like this, because like I didn't, I was very shy, I was lonely, I didn't interact with other people very much. I had been bullied a lot. I was trying to protect myself to some extent, but most of my experiences with anyone having any kind of schizophrenia symptoms were like villains in fictional books. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm insane. I need to hide this. Because I was a kid, I was like, oh my god, they're going to take me to a hospital and they're going to do things I don't want. And I already have issues with hospitals because of other physical things I have going on that doctors were not helpful with. And I'm just like, I don't even want to deal with it.
Mm.
So I just hid it for almost 9 years, I think. I have trouble with time, but it was at least 8 years.
Yeah, I know
A
what you mean. Yeah.
long time. Hid
Mm.
it for a very long time until it got so bad that I could not hide it anymore.
Yeah.
People started realizing something was wrong, but they couldn't figure out what it was. It was mostly because I was in college. My roommate would notice because she lived with me all the time. I couldn't mask around her 24/7. I couldn't go to a different room. Not
Mm.
really. And that wasn't her fault, but she would notice and she'd say, oh, since this weekend you look like you're doing really horrible. What happened? I'd just say, oh, I'm really tired. Technically accurate. But she started to notice, and all my other friends, none of which were super close, but they started to notice things were wrong too, even though I was very good at hiding it. I mean, they all said I was really good at hiding it even after they knew because they just thought I was exhausted
Mm.
and maybe sick, like physically sick,
Mm-hmm.
not mentally sick. Or they thought that I was dealing with inhuman amounts of stress and should go see counseling.
Mm.
So they told me they said that they didn't really realize what was going on at all. I did end up telling them later, but anyway, it got to the point where I was so overwhelmed. It went from 3 to 4 voices to 5 or more voices constantly, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I would wake up in the morning. I would, the voices would start immediately. 4 or 5 or 6 voices yelling at me,
Mm-hmm.
talking about things, talking about threats, because that's where I kind of
So,
thought.
so tell me, you say yelling. Now describe that.
Okay. Um, they would basically yell my name. They would scream for help, or they would scream insults.
And how did it sound? I
Um,
mean, was it like a real voice? I mean, where was it, in
yeah,
your room, in your
it.
head, or outside the head, or
I know
outside the house? How was it?
it doesn't sound like it's in my head. It sounds like it's somebody nearby,
Hmm.
and the distance varies. Like sometimes I'll hear screaming that sounds like it's coming from the next room, but then I look over and see my roommate's not reacting.
Yeah.
Um, the first semester I was at college, I knew that the neighbors across the hall watched horror movies,
Mm.
but I didn't realize they were watching horror movies right away because I heard the screaming and attributed it to my schizophrenia, which I didn't actually know was schizophrenia. So I didn't even realize they were watching horror movies until my roommate was saying, "Oh, the screaming's really bothering me." And I looked at her and I was thinking, like, "Wait, you can hear these too?" But but yeah, that it was still schizophrenia issues because I'm pretty sure there's not a constant horror movie going on
No,
all of my life. That just happened to be an
that's that's
insecure.
that's that's where the time thing gets strange, doesn't it? It's like, how can it just happen all the time? You know, um,
Yes,
that's where there's like a temporal,
it's
some
just
something temporal's going on there, isn't
it was
there?
constant. It
Yeah.
was it'd be like 4 or 5 or more voices start first thing I wake up in the morning, and then because of the other world stuff, I didn't realize this until I started talking to people, but then they're like, but a lot of people were like, "You have actual like PTSD symptoms from this." And I was like,
Mm,
"No, this is just schizophrenia." And they're like, "You have flashbacks to
mm,
events that happened there, and then you vomit, and then you
mm.
can't tell reality from delusion." Yeah, that sounds like this might have been caused by schizophrenia, but you basically have PTSD symptoms. And I was like,
Yeah.
ugh. So I told my doctor, and she was like, "No, no, no, that's just schizophrenia." I was like, "Okay," but yeah, that doesn't actually sound like it. I don't even know.
I think I don't know much about PTSD actually, but there is
Mm.
trauma associated with the symptoms of schizophrenia. There has to be.
There is, yeah,
Exactly. So
back
there is going to be some consequences from that.
somewhat.
Um, so
And
I don't know, I don't
I
know the
was
symptoms of PTSD.
officially diagnosed with PTSD, so I'm very reluctant to claim that label.
Mm,
But I apparently seem to have a decent number of PTSD symptoms.
mm,
But yeah, so I'd wake up, have 4 or 5 voices, have random flashbacks to things that happened in the other world in the past, end up throwing up, couldn't eat breakfast, went to classes, tried to write notes from classes, and then like they would have things the voices were saying in the middle of my notes, which made it
okay.
hard to take notes. I could barely hear the professor. They didn't let us save slides or anything. I didn't want them to know I had issues like this. I would go back to the dorm, collapse for a while, listen to my voices, but just be too tired to get up, force myself to do homework while listening to 3 or 4 things in the background because that helped me
Have,
focus.
Sable, can I ask you,
Yeah.
in a general sense, have you had difficulty getting validation from schizophrenia?
I'm sorry, did you say validation?
Yeah, in terms of folk actually believing you.
Uh, Not yet. I feel like that's probably going to happen because right now I look a lot more stable.
Mm,
And I did look stable then. So to a lot of people, like my parents, were like, "Oh, we just thought you had issues paying attention
mm,
and that you were spacey
mm.
and that you were in your own little world." And I was like, "Well, kinda." The
Mm,
irony. But so I don't know. No one's actually said they don't believe me, and I'm not sure if that's because they actually believe me or if it's because they
Don't want to
think
offend
they
you.
shouldn't deny that. I don't know.
But I think that the inference from that is that there is a lack of empathy, perhaps, you know, um, towards you, from
It's,
maybe folk, in terms of, okay, Sable, look, you've been going through a lot. Let's do something. That sort of thing. I think is lacking. Maybe not just for you, but for all of us. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
carry on with what you were saying.
Yeah. It seems like most people believe me, but I actually, unfortunately, made the choice to, since I had moved to Florida to live with my fiance, which is a very long story that is not going to be in 30 minutes, so we're just going to skip
Mhm.
that. But since I moved here and I was far enough away from my family that I didn't have to interact with them, I have decided to cut most of my family off for now because they are admittedly very toxic. My dad, when I told him I had a schizophrenia diagnosis and and showed him, I kind of wrote a simulator of my schizophrenia voices,
Mhm.
showing what they sound like, and I just used different colors for different voices. I don't even remember how many voices were in this one, probably like 5 or 6. But
Mhm.
and I showed that to my dad, and he looked at it, and some of it like would have random snippets of your dad says you're useless, and I told him, I said that the things that you say, because it's just insults or mockery or teasing constantly. That's the only way he would interact with me, pretty much.
Yeah.
Things that you say get taken by the voices and put on loop for days. Could you just not do that as much, even just a little less? And he basically just doubled the amount he did that.
Mhm.
And it was frustrating. And he read the voice simulator. He said, "Oh, this sounds like you." And I was like, okay, are you just saying I have really bad self esteem and I would beat up on myself like this?
Yeah.
I don't like to think of my voices as me,
Yeah. I
even
kind
though they do probably come from mental things
of.
that are me. But he was like, no, it's because you're masochistic and sadistic.
Mhm.
That's why you have voices like this.
Mhm.
I was like, oh
Did
my
he
god.
actually say that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a maybe a preconception or a lack of complete understanding.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
you've got to realize that the people who do not experience this, and that's say 199 people out of a 200,
know.
they don't. It's very difficult to grasp the concept.
Yeah.
So there is, in your father's defense, there is that it's not him being an ass. It is just it's so difficult for them to grasp the concept of it. You know,
Yeah.
I would say that as my two pence
Funny,
worth.
though, because he would make fun of me for being too empathetic other times until the schizophrenia diagnosis, and then he decided I was masochistic and sadistic. But before that, he would say, "Oh, you're not empathetic. You're pathetic."
Yeah, that's not nice at all, is it?
Yeah, and then my mom kind of tried to help, but she basically just took me to a doctor who prescribed one antipsychotic, and then it didn't work, and then switched and switched and switched and switched and switched, and all sorts of negative side effects.
Hmm.
And it didn't help me. None of the antipsychotics helped me because my schizophrenia, I very quickly realized whenever I was willing to actually think about it, is was very episodic. So it would go from completely horrible to just horrible.
Hmm.
So she'd give me a medicine, it would go from completely horrible to horrible because it was like a cyclical thing. And she'd be like, "Oh, it's working so well." And I'd be like, "No, I still feel completely horrible, but improvement, and then a week later it would be completely horrible again, and then we'd switch the antipsychotics
Yeah.
and add antipsychotics and add anxiety meds, and it was just a
Yeah.
mess. It didn't help. None of it helped. I'm actually not on any medication currently.
Okay.
I'm definitely not saying go off your medication for anyone who has schizophrenia. Bad idea. But for me, what helped was having consistent emotional support because I didn't have that for most of my life. So I
Yeah.
met my current fiance and we talked every day and it helped. And I live here now and I'm not criticized constantly for things. Like my
Yeah.
mom, I told her I needed headphones as a coping mechanism because
Mm.
while it didn't get rid of the voices, it helped improve the soundtrack of my life.
Yeah.
So if I had really, 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 really bad voices to the point where I could not focus on other people's what people were saying, I would use my headphones. But she would complain that I was not being social enough. I wasn't interacting with my little sisters, and she would
Mm.
complain about it until I took them off and gave up. Or if I was pacing, I was told I was in the way, even though that was a very healthy coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So basically, most of the help and support I got from my family was, let's give you a bunch of random meds until we find something that works. None of it works, but it's probably better, right? It's like it was frustrating. But I'm sorry, I got off topic because I was going to talk about how I got my diagnosis, right?
No, it's fine. Um,
Okay.
that's all. That's all good. What you said. Um,
Hmm.
in terms of meds, for some, it's kind of like an option which we'd rather not have. You know, because of like you said about the side effects and this sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of antipsychotics, they they have so many bad side effects. I had multiple medicines that were like, if you overdose, you will die. I was, my suicidal brain was like, good to know. I'm not suicidal anymore,
Mm,
but I was like, okay, okay, file this information away. Not good.
yeah, how's your mental health today?
It's actually good.
Yeah.
I am in an environment that's a lot safer and better for me in a lot of ways. I don't have to deal with the constant criticism.
Mm,
I I could my voices are not as much of a problem. They're not constant anymore, and when they come
mm,
up, it's easier to deal with them. My fiance has accommodated me in a lot of ways.
yeah.
I have um selective mutism, which comes up whenever I have symptoms and stuff
Mm,
that are really bad, or whenever I'm stressed, or when I'm talking about something I haven't been allowed to talk about.
yeah.
Um, I have called it selective mutism because that's what seems to match up the best, and that seems to fit what it actually is. But I'll get to the point where I either am basically mute, can't talk at all.
Yeah.
I get stuck on one word and repeat it a bunch of times. I stutter. I can't
Mm,
speak. But we both have different issues that we're dealing with. So she feels like she needs verbal confirmation to be able to do some certain things to help me, and I have selective mutism, so I can't give verbal confirmation. So we kind of came to a compromise slash accommodation where, since she makes really nice bracelets, I
yeah.
have like 5 bracelets in my engagement ring, and if I'm having hallucinations, I take off my engagement ring and give it to her, and that means I'm having hallucinations and I need help or want help, because
Okay.
I also have trouble saying I need or want help. I have other ones for flashbacks and voices and stuff, and she's able to figure out how to help me better,
Yeah.
even though I can't talk.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. Um Sable,
Hmm.
what do you think? We talked earlier about, I've got various theories
Hmm.
about what is going on exactly with all of this. Um Do you have any ideas, or what do you feel is
I'm not. I'm not sure. I don't like to think of the voices as me.
mm,
I am more willing to think that they are a part of me or like a broken thing in me, but I'm not sure. I have thought about it a lot. I've gotten more confused recently because confused is not the right word. More thoughtful about it recently because I found now that I'm in a environment that's different and safer and I can be myself.
yeah,
I I can do things that other schizophrenics can't for some reason.
yeah,
I haven't heard of other schizophrenics being able to do this, but I can't alter or change the hallucinations that just occur without me wanting them to, like monsters outside and stuff.
mm,
But I can kind of hallucinate on command now,
yeah,
which I just figured out in the last couple weeks, which that's not normal. I have never heard of a schizophrenic that could create their own hallucinations. But I was watching Iron Man. I was like, oh, I wish I had a supercomputer. So then I was like, I could just try to hallucinate it. So I hallucinated a supercomputer and played with it for a few hours. Um, I also was trying to think of how I could make art. So I just decided to hallucinate different filters on different things to see what they'd look like. Also weird. Definitely not a normal schizophrenic thing, and that I am definitely not saying that most or any other schizophrenics would be able to control their hallucinations to any extent. It's just for some reason that works for me, and I'm so confused right now about that. That's not normal. I'm not even sure. Like, I know I have the schizophrenia diagnosis, but also I feel like there's so much other random stuff going on. I don't even know. But it is cool.
I feel, this is just another of my opinions. I think you've had a rough period today, especially, not maybe not today, it was yesterday, wasn't it, when you had your family troubles? I think
Mhm.
that might have affected you emotionally. Um, I had family issues when I was young. My parents have passed away now, but when I was younger, I
Mhm.
went through periods where they did not accept it, um, and they would say things like, "Have you taken your medication?"
Ugh,
As if I was like some sort of do you know what I mean? Some sort of crazy person, and I needed
yeah.
to take tablets to subdue
They
me.
just seem
And
to want to make me less of an inconvenience for them, and if I'm acting in any way they decide is not normal, they are like, "Have you taken your medication yet?" I'm not even on. I was on 7 medications before I moved to Florida,
yeah,
and now I'm on 0, and I'm doing better than
mm,
I ever have, and I'm 99% sure that's not a delusion.
yeah,
I'm calmer. I figured out what being relaxed feels like. I felt like I was constantly in fight or fight for at least a decade.
yeah,
'Cause I just started when I was 12. I didn't get diagnosed until I think I was 20 or 21. I have trouble figuring out dates, but
mm,
20 or 21. Then I got antipsychotics that just plain didn't help. None of them helped. Everyone was like, this is what's supposed to work.
mm.
This is supposed to take it away, or partially take it away. And I was like, this is just completely ineffective.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of my opinion, from my experience, so I take antipsychotics, but I
Hmm.
still do hallucinate. So you could say, oh, well, they're not working, but I spent a year off meds back in 2011, and it did affect me quite badly. Um,
Yeah,
so that's why I take the meds, because it just takes that edge off it a little bit. Um,
yeah.
where it
That's
make
what I.
it is. I'm able to cope, whereas without, it was just too much. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I've heard from actual schizophrenics who say that the antipsychotics work. for most people, it doesn't take it away. It just lessens it to a
Yeah.
manageable degree. And for me, it didn't even do that. So, honestly, since I was so suicidal for so much of my life, from the
Mm,
time I was like 12 to 5 months ago,
yeah.
I, I did not, I had not intended to actually reach my 24th birthday.
Okay.
But I'm not really suicidal anymore. I do get really depressed, but I that's much more infrequent too. I don't really get to the point of being suicidal anymore
Do you
or
know
having
about Do you know about self stigma? Do you know about the concept of self stigma?
is that kind of when you stigmatize your own mental illness even though you
Yes.
have it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite okay. Basically, it's like this. It's like obviously when we're young, we're conditioned by from what we hear, from what we're taught in school, um,
Mhm.
and schizophrenics are stigmatized. So we go through that conditioning as well. So it is quite possible to self stigmatize yourself, um,
Mhm.
and kind of beat yourself up about it. Um, that's quite natural,
I think
Um,
I did for a long time, for sure.
yeah.
I was so miserable and I wasn't getting any support even when I did ask for it. And my mom's form of support was just taking me to a doctor who gave me antipsychotics that changed all the time. My first antipsychotic did take a lot of the symptoms away, but it amped up my anxiety so high that I couldn't sleep
Mm,
during the night, and I would get hyper anxious about things that now I think about that don't even matter. I was afraid that I would not be able to open my locker at work
yeah.
and that I would lose the piece of paper that had the combination that I put in my pocket and the backup one that was in my purse, and also the combination that was in my phone as well because my phone wouldn't be charged or it
Mm.
would break. And then if all of those things happened, I would have to
Mm,
ask my boss, who would then just logically, my boss would have just told me what my combination was because she knows
mm,
who I am. But I was like, and then she'll get angry at me and
yeah.
fire, and then I won't have a job, and then I won't be able to afford college.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
completely over the top ridiculous. That was a
Yeah.
bill of lie, I believe.
Mm.
uh,
So, do you smoke? Do you take nicotine?
sorry, what?
Do you smoke
No, I.
nicotine at all?
Sorry, what?
Nicotine?
No, I
Okay.
have never smoked. I have not done drugs other than prescription drugs. I have barely had alcohol. I had alcohol because I got my diagnosis so close to 21.
Mm,
I had alcohol. Was like, okay, this is way overhyped, but I guess it's fine like tea or something. I don't know, I'm weird. But
yeah.
but then my doctor was like, you cannot have alcohol with antipsychotics, and I was like,
Mm,
how dare you? I'm not allowed. Now I want to,
mm,
but I didn't. And then I had antipsychotics for a couple of years, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is not something I really actually care about. I was just indignant because I dislike being told I can't do things,
yeah.
but which is kind of childish, but also that's my life. Like, I can't drive
Mm,
because I will hallucinate people running in front of the car or oncoming cars, and I can't just stop randomly in the middle of it's
so, your
mental.
visual hallucinations,
Hmm.
is it because I've never had a visual hallucination in terms of what I feel that you're having.
Yeah.
In terms of, I imagine if it's like the voices, then it's going to be like a real, it's like it looks real, you know?
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's something that must be incredibly disturbing. I
It
would,
is the visual hallucinations do. look very real. I was a customer service rep. I actually ended up quitting when I moved to Florida because there was no way to transfer that job to Florida. And
Mm,
long story, don't need to go into that right now. But whenever I was a customer service rep, I would have two monitors to be able to input people's information and stuff. And I am relatively intelligent. I was able to get consistently perfect grades despite dealing with all this stuff
mm,
and score ridiculously high on everything at work.
mm,
But um, I would have like the most benign would be the screen would crack
yeah.
all over the place, and I'd have to try to read through that, and the customer would be getting frustrated because I was too slow, and then I would be having voices, so I'd also have to very, very carefully try to focus to pick their voice out of the other voices. So I'd be listening to like five or six voices at the same time. There would be cracks all
You
over
know,
the
when
place.
you say that, I think, Sable, you need meds. You need some meds to calm it all down. But that's what I would think because that's what that's ridiculous. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
the meds did nothing. None
okay.
of them did nothing. I had to have
Mm,
tried at least six or seven antipsychotics. I
mm,
don't actually have voices constantly anymore.
mm,
I only have them occasionally at this point. I'm in a
mm,
different, completely different environment. I feel safe. I'm able to be
mm,
myself, and now, honestly, I don't have four or five or six voices going on constantly. I have no voices for most of the time. I'm
yeah.
still schizophrenic. I still have schizophrenia symptoms, but the
Mm,
antipsychotics did next to nothing. And then having emotional support in a different environment made it so instead of having four or more voices constantly, I currently don't have any voices. I don't have to pick your voice out from everybody
mm.
else's.
So, but
Like,
I enjoy talking to you. Would you
mhm,
be interested in having a second episode sometime, maybe a couple of months' time or a few months' time, just to talk about it more?
sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to go over too long. Like
No,
I
no,
said,
no, it's fine because I think I think it was good what you were talking about.
okay.
Um, and I could talk. Basically, the reason I asked to come back is
Hmm.
because I feel there's more to go into. Um, Perhaps we can talk about maybe the hallucinations a bit more, or how you feel about them, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, let's close the episode now. But
Okay.
yeah, I think I think it's just good to talk. To be honest with you,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and yeah. So basically, what I do at the end of the episode is I ask you what type of music do you like, because then I play some music at the start and at the end of the episode. Um, I try to get something that you like if you tell me a genre.
Do
Um,
you do you have Spotify?
I Yeah, I use Apple Music actually,
Okay.
but yeah, I
Okay.
mean I can look on Spotify.
Okay. I was just wondering because I made an entire playlist that I had called my schizophrenia playlist, which now is I actually ended up nicknaming it after the autobiography that I made,
Yeah.
Socially Unacceptable, which I think that really the quote that I absolutely hate about writing where they're like, "Oh, the only acceptable form of schizophrenia is writing," and I was like, ugh. Okay, so I took that and I was like, okay, my series is just called Socially Unacceptable with the subtitle, but
Sable, what on Reddit? Just let me know what links you want to put on the description.
okay.
Um, so that's what I try to do, um,
Mhm.
just so folks can, you get a bit of traffic. I think that's
Yeah,
good.
that'd be great.
Um, so
Okay, I'm trying to see if there's a song that. Oh, I know. One second. Do you have time for me to find it real quick?
yeah, it's fine.
Hmm. I feel bad for stealing this one because I'm pretty sure it's about bipolar, not schizophrenia, but it is really cool.
You know,
Yeah, it's
I can't play that particular song because it has royalties attached to it. So
ah
I've what I play is a royalty free track. Um,
mhm.
but that's why I asked you for the genre. So if you
ah
like, do you
okay.
know what I mean?
Sorry, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Mm, such a variety. I don't even. Mm. I have such a broad taste in music. Let me think.
So
I'll just send you stuff.
okay
Sure.
then,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
that's
go this
fine.
much over. I stopped looking at the clock.
No,
Hopefully, when
it's
you edit it down, it'll be at more reasonable length.
no, it's fine. It's a real pleasure talking with you.
You
Um,
too.
and I'll be in touch later on, and we can create another episode and we can talk more because I think that's the important thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just to keep the conversation going.
Hmm.
So thank you very much, Sable. We'll close the episode now, and I'll speak to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.